In 1975, a 24-year-old engineer named Steven Sasson walked into the office of his boss at Eastman Kodak Company in Rochester, New York, and placed a strange contraption on the desk. It weighed 3.6 kilograms. It was cobbled together from a Super 8 movie camera lens, a dozen circuit boards, and a portable cassette recorder. It had no screen. It took 23 seconds to capture a single image, and another 23 seconds to play it back on a television. His boss looked at it. His boss's boss looked at it. Then someone in management said the words that would eventually cost the company everything. That's cute, but don't tell anyone about it. What Sasson had built was the world's first digital camera, and Kodak, the most powerful photography company on Earth, buried it for 17 years. This is not a story about bad technology. It is a story about a company that saw the future coming, understood exactly what it meant, and chose to look away because the math was too good. And then the math became the trap. To understand what Kodak was protecting, you need to understand what Kodak actually was. In the 1970s and 1980s, Kodak controlled roughly 90% of the American film market and 85% of all camera sales in the United States. But that is not where the real money was. The real money was never in the cameras. The real money was in the film, and the chemicals, and the paper, and the processing. Every single time someone clicked a shutter anywhere in America, Kodak got paid. Every roll of film sold, Kodak. Every photo developed at a drugstore, Kodak chemistry. Every print made at a wedding, a birthday, a vacation, Kodak paper. The camera was just the razor. The film was the blades. And Americans were buying billions of blades every year. At its peak, Kodak employed 145,000 people worldwide. The city of Rochester, New York, was essentially a Kodak company town. It funded hospitals, museums, and universities. George Eastman, the founder, had given away more money during his lifetime than most governments spent on public works. The yellow box was not just a brand, it was an infrastructure. And then one of their own engineers showed them a machine that required no film, no chemicals, no paper, no processing. Here is what Kodak's executives were thinking in 1975, and they were not stupid. The digital camera produced images at 0.01 megapixels, 1/100th of a megapixel. To match the quality of a standard film photograph, digital sensors would need to reach at least 2 megapixels. In 1975, that was not a near-future problem. That was a science fiction problem. The internal study Kodak commissioned told them something very specific. Yes, digital photography would take 10, 20 years felt like forever. So they made a rational business decision. Protect the current revenue. Do not cannibalize your own product. Keep the patent, keep the research, but keep it quiet. They were not wrong about the timeline. They were catastrophically wrong about what to do with it. While Kodak sat on the technology, the rest of the world did not stand still. Sony released the Mavica in 1981, a camera that stored images on a small magnetic disc. It was not truly digital, but it did not use film. The image was there, instantly. No waiting, no developing, no Kodak. Kodak looked at the Mavica and decided it was not a threat. They were right. In 1981, it was not a threat, but it was a signal, and they misread what the signal meant. Through the 1980s, Kodak developed digital technology internally. They had to. The engineers kept building things. The patents kept multiplying. By the early 1990s, Kodak actually held more foundational digital imaging patents than almost any company on Earth. They licensed those patents to everyone. Nikon, Canon, Sony, Fujifilm. They collected the royalties and told themselves this was a smart strategy. Let others build the early market. Let others absorb the losses. When digital becomes truly mainstream, Kodak would step in with the Kodak brand, the Kodak quality, the Kodak distribution, and win. In 1991, Kodak released the DCS-100, the world's first professional digital camera. It cost $13,000. It was a Nikon F3 body with a Kodak digital back bolted onto it. It was sold specifically to photojournalists and commercial photographers. Nobody expected ordinary consumers to buy it. That was the last correct decision they made. Meanwhile, inside Kodak's own boardrooms, a war was being fought that never made the newspapers. On one side, the film division. It generated 70% of Kodak's total revenue and nearly all of its profit. On the other side, the digital division. It spent money and promised a future that film executives did not want to arrive. Every time digital got close to threatening film sales, the knives came out. Budgets were cut, executives were reassigned, projects were shelved. The film division was not protecting itself out of greed. It was protecting 145,000 jobs, dozens of factories, and the pensions of an entire city. In 1994, Apple released the QuickTake 100. It was the first mass-market consumer digital camera priced under $1,000. It stored 8 photos. The image quality was poor. Critics dismissed it. It sold out anyway. The same year, Kodak released its own consumer digital camera, the DC-40. It cost $995. It produced 756 by 504 pixel images. Kodak marketed it aggressively. It sold reasonably well. And then Kodak did something that made no sense from outside the company and made perfect sense from inside it. They decided the digital camera should not replace film. It should complement film. The strategy became use digital to drive people back to Kodak photo labs to print their digital images on Kodak paper. They called the initiative Picture CD. You would take digital photos, bring them to a Kodak kiosk, and get prints made on Kodak paper, using Kodak chemistry. The problem was that by 1999, desktop printers had become good enough to print photos at home. And by 2001, people had started sharing photos by email. And by 2004, a company called Flickr had launched. And by 2007, every phone had a camera. The prints never came. Kodak had spent a decade building a bridge to a destination that no longer existed. In 1996, Kodak's stock hit an all-time high. The company was worth $31 billion. They had 145,000 employees. Net profit margins above 15%. In 1999, digital camera sales first exceeded 1 million units in the United States. In 2000, Kodak posted its first major loss. In 2003, film sales began declining at a rate that could not be reversed. Not slowly, not gradually. They fell off a cliff. In 2004, Kodak laid off 15,000 employees. Then another 10,000. Then another 7,000. The factories in Rochester began shutting down one by one. The hospitals Kodak had built started struggling for funding. The museums started looking for new donors. In 2012, Eastman Kodak Company filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection. The company that had invented the digital camera, held the foundational patents, and had 20 years of warning was insolvent. Their entire patent portfolio was sold at auction for $525 million. Apple, Google, and a consortium of tech companies bought the rights to technologies Kodak had invented and then refused to use. Steven Sasson, the engineer who built the first digital camera in his Kodak lab in 1975, gave an interview to the New York Times in 2008. He was asked why Kodak had not pursued the technology aggressively. His answer was careful and precise. He said the response he received in 1975 was not hostility. It was something worse. It was a management culture that had no framework for thinking about a product that made their core business irrelevant. They could not evaluate it. They had no language for it. So they filed it away and returned to the things they understood. He was awarded the National Medal of Technology and Innovation by President Obama in 2009. Kodak was in freefall by then. The camera he built in 1975 now sits in the Smithsonian Institution's National Museum of American History. It weighs 3.6 kilograms. It still works. Kodak emerged from bankruptcy in 2013 as a much smaller company. They abandoned consumer photography entirely. Today, Kodak makes commercial printing systems, packaging materials, and motion picture film for Hollywood studios that still shoot on celluloid for aesthetic reasons. Tell us in the comments. Did you grow up with Kodak film? Do you remember the smell of a freshly developed photo? Because somewhere in a shoebox in your parents' house, there are probably Kodak prints fading right now, and the company that made them no longer exists.